What if one midnight meeting changed the world forever? A single night, a single agreement, and the world was never the same again. In the shadowy corridors of diplomacy, behind closed doors where the fate of nations was sealed in ink and betrayal, two sworn enemies, the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, sat across from each other.
Und wir werden in unserem Zeichen wieder siegen!
The year was 1939. The world was teetering on the edge of war, and tensions were mounting. But no one could have anticipated what happened next. In a clandestine meeting that would remain hidden from the world for years, German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop and Soviet Premier Vyacheslav Molotov signed a pact that sent shockwaves through the global order. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, an unholy alliance between two ideological foes, would ensure that Europe's fate was decided before the first bullet was fired. What the world saw was a non-aggression treaty, but beneath the surface, a dark secret was buried, one that would ignite the most devastating conflict in human history. What did this secret deal contain? How did it lead to the outbreak of World War II? And why did two nations who despised each other suddenly become allies, only to turn into mortal enemies once again? This is the story of the secret meeting that changed world politics overnight. To understand the gravity of this meeting, we must step back to the 1930s, a time when Europe was a ticking time bomb.
Ihr Blicke weiß ich, mein Lebenskampf ist nicht umsonst gekämpft.
Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler, was aggressively expanding its influence, violating treaties, and rearming its forces. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, was growing increasingly paranoid about a potential German invasion. Both nations, despite their deep-seated ideological hatred, saw an opportunity in each other. For Hitler, the Soviet Union was a temporary obstacle on his path to dominance. He feared a two-front war, just like Germany had suffered in World War I. To avoid this, he needed a guarantee that the Soviets would not interfere with his plans to invade Poland. Stalin, on the other hand, distrusted Britain and France, believing that they would do nothing if Hitler turned against the USSR. To him, the best course of action was to buy time. Time to strengthen his military. Time to prepare for the inevitable clash with Nazi Germany. And so, in the dead of night on August 23, 1939, a high-ranking Nazi delegation arrived in Moscow. Tension filled the air as the representatives of two rival empires sat face-to-face, knowing that what they were about to do would change history forever. The meeting was swift. The terms of the pact were straightforward. Germany and the Soviet Union agreed not to attack each other for the next 10 years. But that was just the surface-level agreement. The true horror lay in the secret protocol. A secret clause divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland was to be split in half, with Germany taking the west and the Soviet Union taking the east. The Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, were handed over to Soviet control. Finland was also marked for Soviet domination. The map of Europe was redrawn in complete secrecy. With this deal, Hitler secured his eastern front, giving him the green light to invade Poland without fear of Soviet retaliation. Stalin, in return, gained territory and time, believing he could strengthen his military before an eventual clash with Germany. Neither side truly trusted the other, but for now, their interests aligned. Less than a week after the pact was signed, Hitler unleashed his war machine. On September 1, 1939, German forces stormed Poland from the west, employing their infamous blitzkrieg strategy. The world watched in horror as cities were bombed, civilians were slaughtered, and an entire nation was crushed under the weight of German aggression. But the true betrayal came 2 weeks later. On September 17, 1939, Stalin kept his end of the secret deal. The Soviet Red Army invaded Poland from the east, crushing what little resistance remained. Within days, Poland was erased from the map, its people thrown into a nightmare of occupation and brutality. The world was stunned. Two mortal enemies had become partners in crime, and the betrayal of Poland set the stage for a war unlike any before. But the pact did more than just divide Poland. It shattered the fragile illusion of European diplomacy. Britain and France, who had hoped to keep Hitler in check through appeasement, realized too late that their strategy had failed. On September 3, 1939, they declared war on Germany, marking the official beginning of World War II. For nearly 2 years, Hitler and Stalin maintained an uneasy truce. The Soviets supplied Germany with raw materials, including oil, grain, and metals, fueling Hitler's war machine as he conquered much of Western Europe. But beneath the surface, both sides knew that this alliance was temporary. Then, in June 1941, the inevitable happened. Hitler, driven by his deep hatred for communism and his dream of conquering the East, launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history. Over 3 million German soldiers stormed into the Soviet Union, breaking the pact and shattering the illusion of cooperation. Stalin, caught off guard and reeling from the betrayal, faced the greatest challenge of his rule. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, once a symbol of strategic maneuvering, had now plunged the Soviet Union into a brutal war for survival. The revelation of the secret protocol came years later, after the war ended. Two ruthless leaders, each with their own agenda, saw temporary cooperation as the key to their long-term survival. This was a chess game played on the grandest scale. Every move was calculated. Every decision carried the weight of millions of lives. Hitler saw Poland as his first step toward European domination. Stalin saw Poland as a buffer, a temporary sacrifice in his long-term vision for Soviet expansion. In the dead of night, as negotiations unfolded, the fate of an entire continent hung in the balance. Each side harbored doubts, but the illusion of cooperation was all that mattered at that moment. Behind their diplomatic pleasantries, both Hitler and Stalin were already plotting their next moves, knowing full well that this temporary alliance was destined to crumble in flames and bloodshed. As documents were signed, the fate of millions was sealed in silence. Little did the people of Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland know that their future had just been bartered away in a dimly lit room, thousands of miles from their homes. This was not just about territory. It was about control, dominance, and erasing nations from existence. A generation of people would wake up to find themselves under a new flag, with new rulers who saw them as mere pawns in a grander scheme. What neither of them realized was that they had just set in motion a chain of events that would consume the world in a war more brutal than anything humanity had ever seen. This was not just a political strategy. It was the opening act of a global catastrophe. For the Polish people, there was no escape. They were trapped between two ruthless invaders, caught in a nightmare where survival was uncertain. Families who had lived on the same land for generations now found themselves refugees overnight, fleeing from the destruction that rained down upon them from both sides. This was not just an invasion. It was a ruthless dismemberment. Thousands were executed, millions displaced, and a nation that had once stood proud was now a battlefield for foreign powers. The pact had transformed Poland into a graveyard before the world's eyes. At the Nuremberg trials, captured German documents exposed the hidden details of the pact to the world. Stalin, however, refused to acknowledge its existence for decades, maintaining the illusion that the Soviet Union had been a victim rather than a willing participant in the division of Eastern Europe. For Poland and the Baltic states, the consequences of this secret deal were devastating. Even after the war ended, these nations remained under Soviet control for decades, their independence crushed by the very pact that had sealed their fate. The scars of this betrayal lingered long into the Cold War era. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact remains one of the most chilling examples of realpolitik, where ideology was cast aside in favor of strategic gain. It was a deal that rewrote borders, ignited World War II, and reshaped global politics forever. History is filled with moments where power takes precedence over morality, where leaders make deals in secret, unaware of the long-term consequences. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is a stark reminder that alliances built on convenience, rather than trust, are destined to crumble. For those who lived through its aftermath, the horrors of war, occupation, and betrayal were deeply felt. Yet, history also teaches us resilience. Nations that once suffered under oppression eventually regained their sovereignty. The truth about the pact, once buried, was eventually brought to light. The world must remember these lessons. Transparency, diplomacy, and accountability are crucial in preventing such dark chapters from repeating. The past is not just a story, it is a warning. If this story fascinated you, share it. Let more people know about this hidden chapter of history. Knowledge is power, and understanding the past helps us build a better future. What other secret agreements changed the course of history? Drop a comment below, and let's keep the conversation going. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's most shocking moments. The past is full of secrets. Are you ready to uncover them?